The wind was hot and dry as it swept over the golden fields of Theros. Tall, wheat-like plants swayed under the sun, but there was no peace in the air. The ground trembled with each heavy step of the harvester. Its spinning blades glowed red at the edges, ready to slice anything in its path, and right in front of it, tied with ropes, was a girl, small, weak, and silent. Her name was Nalia. She was no older than 15 cycles, her skin a soft lavender, her long silver hair tangled with dust and dirt. She didn't scream, she didn't move. Her eyes were half shut, her lips dry, and her arms tightly bound behind her back. The ropes bit into her skin, leaving marks that looked weeks old. She had been left there, left by her own family. In the far corners of the galaxy, some alien clans believed in offering the weakest to the machines to bless the next harvest. It was cruel but common. To them, Nalia was just one more mouth they could no longer feed, one more burden too soft to carry. The harvester crawled closer, massive wheels crushing everything beneath it. Its sensors scanned the field not to detect life, but to stay on course. No one expected a child to be lying in its path, and no one would stop it, but someone was watching. Far up on a metal tower, a human wiped sweat from his brow and looked through his binoculars. His name was Callan, a mechanic from Earth working maintenance shifts on this backwater planet. He had seen strange things out here, but nothing like this. At first it looked like a broken fence post in the field, but when the shape shifted slightly, his heart froze. He adjusted the lens and saw a figure, a girl, tied up, skin bruised, hair covered in dust, and the harvester was heading straight for her. "No!" Callan shouted as he dropped the binoculars. He grabbed his toolkit and sprinted down the tower steps. His boots slammed against metal, then dirt. He ran like his life depended on it, but it wasn't his life in danger. His earpiece buzzed. "Callan, what's going on? Why are you off the tower?" But he didn't answer. He was already halfway across the field. Dust clouded around his legs, heat beat down on his neck, and still the harvester roared closer. The machine was only 30 meters away from the girl now. Its blades hummed with energy. It didn't know she was alive. It didn't care. Callan waved his arms, yelling at the top of his lungs, "Stop the harvester! Someone's in the field!" No response. He reached into his pack and fired a red flare high into the sky. That got attention, the driver of the harvester, a bored alien worker half asleep in his cabin, looked up at the blinking light. Then he saw Callan jumping and pointing wildly. Seconds from impact, he slammed the emergency stop. The harvester groaned, hissed, and finally screeched to a halt, just 3 meters from the girl. Callan rushed forward, heart pounding. He knelt beside the girl and touched her cheek. She was breathing, but barely. Her skin was burning with fever, lips cracked from dehydration. Hey, you're okay now," Callan whispered. He took out his knife and carefully cut the ropes binding her arms and legs. Nalia flinched at first, but didn't speak. She was too weak, too scared. He lifted her gently into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. Just skin and bones wrapped in rags. Callan looked around. No one from the village was coming. No one was running to check on her. No one even cared. "Monsters," he muttered. He carried her back across the field. Her head resting on his chest, the harvester stood still, silent now as if it too was ashamed. Back at his small maintenance shed, Callan laid her on a cot and gave her sips of water. She coughed and drank slowly, eyes flickering open just once. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. He sat beside her, watching her breathe. The day was quiet now, but his mind wasn't. He kept seeing her lying in that field, motionless like trash left to rot. But she wasn't trash, she was alive, she had a name, and he had saved her just in time. Callan had seen war, famine, and storms that tore metal from walls, but he had never seen something like that girl, left to die beneath spinning death. As the sun dropped low behind the distant hills, he sat beside her, watching her chest rise and fall, slow and shallow. The field outside was quiet again, but inside him everything was loud. The girl hadn't spoken since he carried her in. She was wrapped in one of his old jackets now, curled up on the cot like a ghost. Her hands twitched sometimes, as if she was dreaming of running, but her legs didn't move. Callan sighed and looked down at the rope burns on her arms. Some were old, faded red lines, but others were fresh and deep. He had radioed headquarters to report a harvesting emergency, but got only silence in return. Nobody wanted to get involved, especially not for an alien girl labeled waste. Callan leaned forward and whispered, "They don't get to decide your worth." He wasn't sure if she heard him, but for a moment, her eyes fluttered open, The girl blinked at him, then quickly looked away, her body tensed, pulling back into the corner of the cot. "It's okay," Callan said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're safe here." He offered her a bite of dry ration bread, breaking it into small pieces. She stared at it like she didn't know what food was. Then slowly, she reached out, fingers shaking, and took it. Her hand was ice cold. "What's your name?" Callan asked, trying to smile. No answer. But she didn't run, didn't scream. That was something. He pointed to himself. "I'm Callan," he said. Then he gently tapped her chest with 2 fingers. "You?" The girl hesitated, then whispered, "Nah. Playa?" The voice was barely louder than a breath, but Callan smiled. "Nalia," he repeated. "That's a beautiful name." She flinched again, as if she had never heard kindness before. Later that night, as Nalia slept wrapped in a blanket, Callan sat at his workbench. He tapped into the local network, searching records on the nearby alien villages. There was a report from 3 days ago, one offering accepted by the Harvest clan. No name, no details, just that line. His stomach turned. They really had done it. Her own family had signed her away, just like property. He closed the file, unable to read more. "Monsters," he whispered again, fists clenched. A buzzing noise caught his attention. One of his scanners showed an unfamiliar signal, something embedded inside Nalia's arm. "A tracker," he swore under his breath, rushing back to her side gently. He moved her arm under the scanner wand. There it was, a thin metallic dot under her skin, glowing faintly. It wasn't just a tracker. It was a tag, marking her as offered, as something no one could rescue without punishment. If the patrols picked up her signal, they'd be here. And they wouldn't care what Callan had done to save her. They'd take her back, or worse, destroy her on the spot. He had broken protocol by interfering. He sat down, wiping his face, the decision forming in his mind like fire. "I'm not letting them take you," he said softly, looking at her. "You deserve to live, not die forgotten in a field." The next morning, Nalia woke up to the smell of something warm. Callan had heated canned soup and was stirring it gently. She sat up slowly, her eyes watching his every move. "Still unsure, still afraid, you feeling better?" he asked, placing the bowl near her. She nodded. Just once, her voice came out cracked. "Why did you stop it?" "The harvester?" Callan asked. She nodded again, her eyes glassy. "No one stops it. I saw you," he replied simply. That was enough. She stared at him for a long time, then asked, "Do you work for the harvesters?" Callan shook his head. "I fix things, machines, not people." "But I was already chosen," she whispered, looking down. "My mother said I eat too much. My uncle said I cry too loud. They all said I should go." His heart ached at those words. He knelt beside her, not too close, and said gently, "They were wrong. You don't belong to them anymore." Nalia looked at him with wide, teary eyes, and for the first time she didn't look afraid, just confused. Like no one had ever told her she was allowed to belong somewhere else. But outside something beeped, a signal. Faint and slow, but moving. Callan's scanner lit up. "Warning, drone sweep detected." "They're looking for you," he said, his voice turning serious. He stood up fast, checked the perimeter, and turned off every light in the shed. "We don't have much time." He turned back to her and said, "You're going to have to trust me now." Nalia didn't answer, but she didn't hide either. She simply nodded, and for the first time, hope flickered in her eyes. The room was dark except for the glow of old engine lights. Callan moved fast, switching off every panel that could send out heat or movement signals. Outside, the scanner buzzed again. Slowly rising in pitch, the drones were near. Maybe just beyond the ridge. Nalia sat up, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. Her eyes were wide, not with fear, but with something else. She was trying to understand why someone would risk so much for her. No one had ever done that before, not in her world, not in her family. Callan crouched by the window, watching the sky. A small flicker of silver passed above them. "A scout drone," he whispered. "Don't move. Not even a breath." Nalia nodded, barely even blinking. The drone hovered near the workshop, spinning in place. Then it flashed a red light and moved on. Callan let out a slow breath, his heart pounding. "That was close," he said, standing up. "Are they coming for me?" she asked, voice trembling. "Yes," Callan said. "They think you're property now, like a tool or a broken part." "But I'm not," she whispered, eyes wet. "I'm not broken." "No," he said firmly. Kneeling beside her, You're a person, Nalia?" She looked at him as if hearing that word for the first time. Person, not burden, not offering, not waste. He stood up and walked toward a locked cabinet. Inside were spare parts, hidden tools, and a med kit. He brought it over and began cleaning the cuts on her wrists. She flinched at the sting but didn't pull away. "You know," he said softly, "back on Earth, we don't leave our own to die." Nalia looked away, her voice dry. "On my planet, weakness is punished. My family said I didn't have the strength to survive the new season." Callan frowned. "So they tied you up and left you in front of a machine?" She nodded slowly. "They said it was better for all." Her voice cracked. "But I wanted to live." "You still can," Callan said, wrapping clean cloth around her wrist. "You just need to make it a little longer." Later that evening, the two of them sat near the old heat coil, sipping warm broth. The stars began to appear through the cracked metal roof. Nalia stared up at them, her voice barely above a whisper. "I used to dream about them," she said. "The stars. I thought maybe someone out there would come for me." Callan didn't say anything at first. He just looked at her, really looked at the way she curled her fingers around the cup, like it might be taken, at the bruises fading along her cheek, at the deep loneliness behind her tired eyes. "You don't have to dream anymore," he finally said. "You're not alone now." She turned to him slowly, unsure if she could believe it. "Why me?" she asked. "You don't know me, I'm not even human." Callan smiled softly. "Because I don't see a species. I see someone who wants to live. And that's enough." For a while, there was only silence, and then just the smallest curl of her lips. A shy, quiet smile, but the moment didn't last long. A red alert flashed on Callan's terminal. "Tracker activated, tagged unit located." Callan cursed under his breath and jumped to his feet. "They activated your tag," he said. "They know you're alive. They're going to send a unit." Nalia stood too, afraid but ready. "What do we do?" she asked, voice shaking. "We run," Callan said, already gathering supplies. He packed tools, dried food, a blanket, and a handheld scanner. He opened a hidden panel in the floor and pulled out an old transport sled. Low-tech, off-grid, perfect for hiding. "You're going to have to trust me now," he said. Nalia nodded, her hands gripping the edge of the sled. "I do," she whispered as they stepped into the night. Wind howled across the plains. The stars above were bright, the moons rising behind them in the direction of the village. Lights blinked in the sky, ships approaching. They had no time left, but for the first time in her life, Nalia wasn't running alone. As the sled hummed across the dirt and metal paths, Callan glanced at her and said, "Where we're going, no one will own you." She looked at him and said, "And you won't leave me?" He smiled and shook his head. "Not a chance," and under the stars, the girl who was once thrown away began to believe in something new. That maybe she wasn't unwanted after all. Maybe, just maybe, she was worth saving. The sled moved fast across the dry plains, kicking up trails of silver dust. The wind grew colder as the hills rose in the distance, hiding them from the sky drones. Callan kept his eyes on the scanner in his hand, one signal bar blinking red. The tracker inside Nalia was still live. "We need to remove it," he said, teeth clenched. "They'll find you no matter where we go." Nalia sat beside him, clutching a blanket around her shoulders. She didn't complain, didn't ask where they were going. She just stared at the stars. Trying to be brave, in her heart a storm was growing. She had seen her mother look away when they left her in the field. She had heard her uncle say, "No one will care if she's gone." Now someone cared. But the fear still clung to her like old chains. After an hour of riding, Callan stopped the sled near an abandoned silo. Half buried in sand, they slipped inside and Callan locked the door behind them. He set up a dim blue light and pulled out his tools. "We do this now," he said. "It'll hurt, but once it's out, they can't track you anymore." Nalia nodded slowly. Her jaw tight, she laid her arm on the table, the same one that had carried the glowing tag. Callan took a breath, sterilized the blade, and began. She didn't scream, she didn't cry. She just clenched her teeth and stared at the ceiling. When it was over, Callan dropped the tiny silver tag into a sealed metal box and crushed it. "Done," he said, gently wrapping her arm. "You're free now." Nalia looked at the bandage, then at him. Her voice cracked. "No one ever tried to free me before." He gave a tired smile. "Then let this be the first of many." But while they hid, the village behind them had changed. Rumors had begun to spread she survived. I heard a human stop the harvester. Won't that bring punishment on us all? Nalia's older sister Siraya sat inside their family hut. Nervously twisting her fingers, she was tall, proud, and had never spoken kindly to Nalia. But now she was afraid. We said she was gone, Siraya whispered to her father. We told them the offering was accepted. The harvester wouldn't stop without cause. But the patrols had come asking questions. And now, a fine hovered over their family's name. Dishonor, shame, and whispers followed them wherever they walked. If the girl truly lived and the harvester had been halted, they could all be punished. Siraya stared into the fire pit, her face pale. Maybe we should have just ended it ourselves, she muttered. Back in the silo, Nalia sat on a pile of folded cloth. Her eyes distant, she was healing slowly, physically. Yes, but her heart was still fragile. I used to believe my sister loved me, she said quietly. When I was very small, she would braid my hair. Callan looked up from repairing the sled's battery core. She might have once, he said. People change when they're scared, Nalia frowned. But why would fear turn love into hate? Callan paused, then said, Because fear makes people forget who they really are. But that's not your fault. She nodded slowly, trying to understand. Will they come again? She asked, even without the tracker? Callan nodded, they might. But next time, we'll be ready. That night a storm rolled in from the south. Thunder echoed across the hills, lightning flashing behind dark clouds. Inside the silo, Nalia sat by the doorway. Wrapped in her blanket, she watched the sky as if searching for something, maybe a sign, maybe peace. Callan joined her, holding a steaming metal mug. Here, he said. Offering it to her, she took it, hands warming against the heat. They sat in silence as the wind howled outside, then she spoke. I don't know what I am now. I don't belong to them, but I'm not like you either. Callan looked at her, then said, You're someone who survived. You're someone who mattered enough to save. She blinked, tears suddenly filling her eyes. No one had ever said that to her before, not even once. She didn't know if she deserved it, but she wanted to believe it. As the storm passed and silence returned, Callan stood and said, We leave at dawn. We'll head toward the canyon pass. There's a human base 2 sectors east, and if we make it there, you'll be safe. Nalia stood too, her body still sore but stronger than before. Then let's go, she said. Her voice was soft but steady in the distance. The winds carried more than dust. They carried whispers of her survival. And in the village where she was once unwanted, fear had already begun to grow because the girl they threw away was alive and one human, was willing to fight for her. The storm had passed, but the danger hadn't. The early morning sky turned gray, with clouds hanging low like a warning. Callan and Nalia had packed what little they could carry: tools, water, food, and a map made from old scraps of cloth. They left the old silo just before the sun touched the horizon. As they rode the sled over rocky trails, Nalia kept glancing over her shoulder. Every small noise in the distance made her flinch. She felt it in her chest, like something was watching. Callan noticed and said quietly, Don't look back too much. You'll miss what's ahead. But even he knew the silence behind them wasn't peace, it was a storm waiting to strike. Back near the village, the enforcers had arrived. Sleek black patrol ships hovered above the wheat fields, buzzing like angry wasps. 3 heavy enforcement drones dropped down from the ships, each one the size of a small car. Shaped like a giant metal insect, they scanned the fields, then turned toward the family house marked by the offering record. Siraya stood outside with her head down, her hands shaking. The enforcer's voice came through cold and mechanical. Where is the offered unit? The harvester was stopped, the tag destroyed. This is violation. I don't know, she stammered. My father said she was taken by the field. We thought she was gone. Lies are punishable, the drone said, its camera eye flashing red. Another drone landed behind her, its long legs scraping across the dirt. Name the rescuer, it ordered. Siraya hesitated, then whispered. A human mechanic from the border zone, his name is Callan. She didn't want to say it, but she also didn't want to be the one held responsible. She hoped that by giving his name, the drones would go after him and leave her family alone. The drones sent the name to Central Enforcement in moments. An alert spread through the sky routes. Unauthorized rescue confirmed, human code Callan Rayner. Violation, Interference with offering system, unit tag destroyed. Target classified as hostile. Back on the canyon trail, Kalen's portable scanner beeped fast and sharp. He checked the signal and his jaw tightened. "They've got my name," he said. "They know who I am." "What does that mean?" Nalia asked, clutching the edge of the sled. "It means they're not just looking for you anymore," Kalen replied. "They're coming for me too." The sled picked up speed, racing down a narrow path between high rock walls. Above them, a sharp hum echoed through the air. Drones. Getting closer, Kalen pointed to a cave ahead, its mouth hidden by hanging vines and boulders. "Hold on," he said, and swerved the sled toward it. Inside the cave it was dark and cold, the air damp and full of dust. They brought the sled behind a large rock and powered it down. Outside, the sound of drone wings grew louder, then stopped. "They've landed," Kalen whispered. "They're close." Nalia huddled beside him, heart pounding. The cave felt like a trap now, not a shelter, but Kalen wasn't done yet. He pulled out an old EMP spike, illegal tech but powerful. "When I say run," he whispered, "run. Don't look back." He crawled to the cave's edge and placed the EMP spike on the wall. Then he tapped in the timer, 10 seconds. The drones floated just outside the cave. Scanning with red lights, one of them said, "Target identified." A beam of red light stretched toward the cave's mouth. Then the EMP detonated. Boom! A pulse of electric blue light burst from the wall. The drones shook, their lights flashing wildly, then collapsed in the dirt. Sparks flew, circuits fried, and the air sizzled with static. Kalen grabbed Nalia's hand. "Now!" They sprinted out of the cave, past the twitching drones and back onto the sled. Kalen hot-wired the engine with shaking fingers, and the sled roared to life. They took off into the canyon, leaving the broken machines behind. They didn't speak for a long while, Nalia finally said. "You could have died." Kalen nodded, breathing hard. "So could you." "But I'm not letting them take you back," she looked at him, her voice soft. "You don't have to keep helping me." "I know," Kalen said. "That's why I will." As the sun climbed higher, the human base was still far ahead, but closer than it had ever been. Behind them, the enforcement drones would soon be replaced. But for now, they had a head start. And in that narrow space between danger and escape, hope was still alive. The sled finally gave out just past the canyon line. Its engine stuttered, then coughed once and died in a puff of black smoke. Kalen hit the brakes and kicked the console. "That was our ride," he muttered, stepping off and shielding his eyes from the rising sun. They had pushed it too hard, too fast, but it had gotten them far, maybe far enough. Nalia stood beside him, looking out over the vast dry lands ahead. The sky stretched endlessly above them, pale blue with streaks of orange. The land was flat now, covered in dry, cracked earth and old husks of farming machines. A long walk through dust and silence. Kalen checked the map, his fingers tracing an old route carved between solar towers and dead irrigation lines. "If we keep going east," he said, "there's a trade post about 2 days away. And beyond that, human sector walls." 2 days, Nalia whispered, her eyes scanning the endless land ahead. Her feet were still sore, her body tired. But she didn't complain, not anymore. Kalen wrapped a scarf around her neck and handed her a water pouch. "Small sips only," he said. "We need this to last." They began walking, step by step, into the heat and wind. By midday, the sun burned like fire above them. Dust rose with every step, clinging to their skin and clothes. They passed the broken skeleton of an old crawler, its wheels buried in sand. Nalia stopped to touch it, her fingers brushing over faded carvings in her native language. It was a transport used by her people long ago, before the rules changed. "I used to ride in one like this," she said softly. "When I was little, we would go to the river with my mother." She smiled faintly, then looked down. Before she changed, Kalen didn't push her to speak more. He just said, "People change when their hearts get small." But not all people. They kept walking, the silence between them becoming less heavy, more peaceful. That night, they stopped beneath a crumbled communication tower. Kalen lit a small fire with heat cells, and they ate the last of the bread. Nalia sat across from him, holding her knees. "Will they chase us this far?" she asked. "Maybe," Kalen said honestly. "But they won't find us easily." She was quiet for a while, then said, "Why are the human sectors different?" Kalen looked at her. "Because we made a different choice. Long ago, We decided life has value, even broken, even poor. He paused. Even abandoned, she looked at him, her voice soft. I'm all of those things. Callan leaned closer. You're also brave, smart, and still standing. That matters more. Later that night, as the stars came out, Nalia couldn't sleep. She sat beside Callan, who was repairing a solar battery with careful hands. She said quietly, Do you think I could be useful? One day? He didn't look up, just smiled and said, You already are. The next day, the wind changed. It came fast, strong, and dry, carrying sharp grains of sand, a dust storm. Callan wrapped his jacket around Nalia and pulled her close behind a broken fence. The world turned orange and brown, visibility gone. The storm roared for almost an hour. When it cleared, the sun was lower and the land looked unfamiliar. But in the distance they saw it, a light, blinking red and blue from the top of a pole. A beacon, Callan said, eyes wide. We're close to the trade post. They picked up speed, energy returning to their legs. But Nalia stopped suddenly, holding Callan's arm. Her sharp alien eyes had spotted movement. Figures near the beacon, 3 of them tall, armored, scanning the horizon. Enforcers? She asked, voice tight. No, Callan whispered, using his scope. Too thin, too relaxed. Scavengers. Could still be dangerous. They circled wide, sneaking along the side of a hill. As they passed through brush and dry roots, Nalia stumbled. She hissed in pain. Her foot had twisted between stones. Callan rushed to her side, lifting her gently. You okay? She winced. I think it's sprained. Without a second thought, Callan picked her up in his arms. She wrapped her arms around his neck, surprised but silent. You're stubborn, he said, walking through the dust, and you never give up. She smiled through the pain. Neither do you. By nightfall, they reached a small ruined shack near the edge of the post. Callan set Nalia down and treated her ankle. Wrapping it carefully, she watched him work. Eyes full of something new, not just safety. Trust, not just kindness. Family. As the fire flickered again, Nalia looked up and said, If I make it to the human sector, what happens next? Callan paused, then said, Then we start over. You choose who you want to be. She nodded. And if they try to take me again? He met her gaze. They'll have to go through me. And in the quiet dust under the stars and broken towers, the girl once abandoned found the first promise she ever believed in. The morning sun rose slowly behind the ruins, casting long golden shadows across the land. Nalia sat quietly on a stone, her ankle still wrapped, the pain fading but not gone. She watched Callan carefully adjust the straps on the backpack, loading in their last supplies today. They would cross the border just beyond the trade post ruins. Behind a cracked steel wall was the old checkpoint. One broken scanner still blinked green every few minutes. And further beyond that, a clean road that led to the human sector. Real safety, real laws, real people. But between them and that gate stood a tall fence, a single patrol bot, and the fear that someone might still stop them. Callan knelt beside Nalia, placing a soft cloth in her hand. For your eyes, he said. Some of the lights ahead might sting. She held it gently and asked, Are you sure they'll let me in? I'm not even human, he looked at her. Calm and steady. They'll see what I see, he said. Someone worth saving, and I'll vouch for you, no matter what. They walked slowly, Callan supporting Nalia when the pain in her ankle returned. Each step closer to the gate felt like walking into a new world. But neither of them stopped at the checkpoint. An old machine stood blinking under dust. A camera lens turned toward them and scanned Callan first. Human ID confirmed. Callan Rayner, civilian technician. Status clean. Then it scanned Nalia, pausing longer. Unregistered biological unit. Non-human. No sector record found, the terminal beeped. State your purpose, Callan stepped forward. She's under my care. She was left to die in the fields by her own kind. I saved her life. I request emergency humanitarian registration under Section 12. Silence followed. A small red light blinked, then turned yellow. The camera moved back to Nalia, zoomed in on her bruises. Her bandaged wrist, her wounded ankle. Then, without warning, a speaker crackled. Request forwarded to internal authority. Stand by, Nalia gripped Callan's hand tightly. Her fingers trembled, her eyes full of fear. What if they say no? She whispered. I'll fight, Callan replied calmly. We didn't come this far to lose. A second light lit up. Green. Entry permitted, the voice said. Unit registered, Nalia Rayner. Temporary human sector status approved. She froze, confused, then turned to Callan slowly. They gave me your name, she said, shocked. Callan smiled, eyes warm. I figured you needed a fresh start. And a name that meant something new. Tears filled her eyes. And this time she didn't hide them. She didn't wipe them away. She let them fall freely because this time, they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of belonging. A gate hissed open, and they stepped through together. The human sector wasn't shiny or perfect, but it was different. Clean water flowed from pipes. Soft blue lights guided walkways. People didn't look away when they saw her. They looked with curiosity, not cruelty. Callan found a temporary shelter in the outer district, a place where refugees and survivors stayed. He filled out papers, signed documents, made Nalia official in a world that had once called her nothing. That night, as they sat under a working roof for the first time in days, Nalia touched the new ID card in her pocket and asked, "Why did you do all this?" "You didn't have to." Callan thought for a moment, then answered, "I've seen machines destroy towns. I've seen people turn on each other. But I've never seen someone so alone and still try to live. You reminded me what it means to keep going no matter what." She looked down at her hands, now clean, wrapped in soft sleeves instead of rags. "Does this mean I'm someone now?" "You've always been someone," he said gently, "but now, the world knows it too." Over the next few days, Nalia learned new things: how to use a data screen, how to read street signs, how to smile without fear. She helped in the shelter kitchen, even when her ankle ached. She laughed once when Callan dropped a cooking pot, and the sound of it felt like music. One evening, she stood on the shelter's rooftop. Looking at the stars, Callan joined her, holding 2 mugs of hot tea. "I used to think the stars were watching me," she said. "But now I think maybe they were waiting." He looked at her, quiet for a moment. "Waiting for what?" "For me to find someone who saw me as more than a sacrifice." He handed her the tea and said, "You're not a sacrifice, Nalia. You're the proof that hope still exists." And as the stars glowed above, and the wind moved gently through the quiet streets, the girl once tied in front of death itself now stood free. She was no longer the unwanted one. She was Nalia Rayner, and she belonged somewhere at last.